Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. I'm going to start today talking about Seattle. King Mob has taken Seattle. Seattle is a city that I've spent a lot of time in my life. It's a city that I used to like quite a bit. But of course, Seattle has changed. Seattle was, not that long ago, a rather tough working class port town dominated by Boeing and by the logging and fishing industries. But now it's the weakest, wokest city in America. So from the Daily Mail, protesters kick out cops and set up 6-block autonomous zone as a memorial to George Floyd before taking over Seattle City Hall to demand mayor's resignation. There seems to be a new tradition in Seattle that their mayors must be homosexual. The current one, Jenny Durkan, is, and the fellow before her was a homosexual male who left under a cloud after repeated accusations of the sexual molestation of minors. Peaceful protesters took over Seattle City Hall Tuesday night, peaceful, always peaceful, to demand the mayor's resignation after setting up a 6-block autonomous zone as a memorial to George Floyd and suing city cops over their aggressive tactics. I should point out that there's not really all that many black people in Seattle. Last time I checked, I think it was something like 6%. Hundreds of protesters marched inside the lobby at around 9 p.m. Tuesday, carrying Black Lives Matter banners and calling for Mayor Jenny Durkan to stand down. The group was led by Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant, more on her later, who unlocked the building and welcomed the protesters inside. Footage shared on social media showed demonstrators giving impassioned speeches, saying calls for an end to systemic racism and police brutality following Floyd's death are making history. The police fled from the so-called autonomous zone. I guess that's what police do now. If they run into any untoward situation, breakdown of public safety, they simply get the hell out of there. The peaceful crowd, once again peaceful, camped out inside the government building for only about an hour before continuing to the newly created Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, a zone occupied by demonstrators around a police precinct. Durkan has come under fire for her handling of the civil unrest in the city, with calls mounting for her to resign. Sawant, again, more on her later, a staunch critic of the mayor, demanded Durkan step down and blamed her for the violence and brutality of cops against protesters. If Mayor Durkan refuses to step aside, it will be the responsibility of the city council to remove her by introducing articles of impeachment, Sawant said last week. The police have inflicted tear gas, mace, rubber bullets, flashbang grenades, curfews, arrests, and other repressive tactics on Seattle activists and residents, including children, in an attempt to bully and silence the protest movement. The American Civil Liberties Union, Washington Korematsu Center at Seattle University School of Law, and the law firm Perkins Coie filed a lawsuit against Seattle police on behalf of the Black Lives Matter Seattle King County. These daily demonstrations are fueled by people from all over the city who demand that police stop using excessive force against Black people, and they demand that Seattle dismantle its racist systems of oppression. Livio de la Cruz, board member of Black Lives Matter Seattle King County, said in a statement. Looking at a picture here of Jenny Durkan wearing a very curious jacket. It almost looks like a police jacket. It's got patches on both arms and her name across the breast. For some reason, the protesters who've occupied part of 6 square blocks of Seattle are watching a documentary, and there's a picture of Ronald Reagan on it. I guess he was the evil man who shut down the demonstrations in Berkeley, California. It is unacceptable that the Seattle Police Department would then respond to these demonstrations with more excessive force, including using tear gas and flashbang grenades. Cops have been caught on camera acting aggressively, oh dear, and blasting tear gas and pepper spray in the faces of peaceful, once again, peaceful protesters during the weeks of civil unrest following Floyd's death on Memorial Day. The paragraph doesn't state whether this is happening in Seattle or not. Durkin and Police Chief Carmen Best issued an apology to demonstrators over the heavy-handed tactics of officers and banned the use of tear gas for at least 30 days from Friday. So Carmen Best, another female police chief, that seems to have become an American tradition, that police chiefs must be black, and better if they're black women. She replaced Kathleen O'Toole. Okay, so they've had two in a row. And wait a minute. She's a black woman. She's a black woman. But apparently, the fact that a black woman is police chief of Seattle, well, I guess she wouldn't have any particular interest in violence against black people, right? Just like the black police chief in Minneapolis. This is a very much underreported story that apparently no one is responsible for any of this. No one is responsible, not black police chiefs, because, you know, it's not like they could crack down on this so-called systemic racism. Oh, since starting her career, Best has served in a wide range of positions, including school safety, media relations supervisor, operations lieutenant, and assistant chief in the Criminal Investigations Bureau. She's received Newsmaker of the Year from the Seattle Black Press, so apparently she has a tight relationship with black people in Seattle. But again, she apparently has done nothing to change the culture of the Seattle police, because I guess it's too much to expect the people actually in charge to take responsibility for their actions. This is from my Northwest today. Let's see. It didn't take long before what's known as the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone to take shape. Barriers originally set up by police have been repurposed as to set up the borders of the zone. These barriers are very heavy indeed. I wonder how they moved them. What used to be the Seattle Police Department on the corner of 12th and Pine now reads Seattle People Department. Cairo Radio's Hannah Scott and Nicole Jennings spent time in the Chaz Tuesday, watching for hours as 100 or so people began setting up tents, putting up signs, and preparing to set up camp as part of their ongoing protest against police brutality. It was a really energetic day. It was very peaceful, Hannah reported. Really a whole different vibe than I'd seen the other nights I've been here. A very peaceful experience, almost like a street fair, honestly. Reporting early in the afternoon, Tuesday, Nicole also described free food and medical aid available for demonstrators on every corner. Some food and supplies were also distributed to the homeless population in the surrounding area. The group even reportedly organized its own garbage collection Wednesday morning. Yes, and then what did it do with the garbage? Later on in the night, a projector screen was set up as the crowd gathered to watch Ava DuVernay's documentary on systemic racism in the U.S. police system, 13th. News of that reached DuVernay herself, who gave the group a shout out on Twitter. Blessings and bravery to all the good people at Chaz tonight. Onward. XO. The crowd stationed at 12th and Pine is trying to prove it can operate on its own without the police no longer occupying the East Precinct. Their position is that they can take care of themselves, Hannah said. The group also recently published a lengthy 30-point list of demands for Seattle City Council and the mayor's office. More on that later. Some go far beyond what council members like Teresa Mosqueda and Kashama Sawant have proposed in recent days, including a call to abolish the Seattle Police Department and the attached criminal justice apparatus. Now, keep in mind, when anyone tells you but no one is calling for the police to be disbanded. They are lying to you. We have an insurrection in Seattle led by people who are demanding that the police department be abolished. It's unclear how long the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone will be allowed to remain in the area around 12th and Pine, or even how long police plan to stay out of the East Precinct. In the meantime, though, the crowd appears hunkered down for the long run. I've been informed that a similar atrocity was perpetrated in Portland under Mayor Ted Wheeler a couple of years ago, and this went on for something like 5 weeks, and it has been described as a toxic waste zone, which was very difficult and expensive to clean up. This is from the post-millennial Antifa mob planning to take over more Seattle neighborhoods. A source on the ground in Seattle says that other police precincts around the city are preparing to be the next targets. And Andy No has a tweet here where he has put an illustration of a tweet from Seattle Antifa, which, remember, Antifa is an organization that doesn't exist. We need more people with guns at the Chaz. Regarding the autonomous zone established by the Antifa-led mob, the source, whose anonymity we are protecting, says they bar media from entering and screen people coming in. They are walking around fully armed, talking about making their own currency and making their own flag. SPD is talking about abandoning the West Precinct now. West Precinct has the 911 call center. This is just like the Occupy movement. Soon we'll have feces and drugs everywhere, and people getting assaulted and raped in the encampments. They've been relocating everything quietly while the focus has been elsewhere. They know that it's only a matter of time before these fools have to direct their issues back on the police. Since yesterday, I haven't seen a single police officer or vehicle downtown. Even when they took over City Hall, there were no signs of the police department at headquarters across the street. The main concern, according to the source, is that the SPD West Precinct also houses the call center, as mentioned. There have been reports of sensitive material and equipment being moved out of the West Precinct. Walk-in lobbies of all precincts are all shut down, as local officials appear to be conceding handing over more of the city as well as police precincts to Antifa. Antifa are extorting money and businesses in the Capitol Hill zone for protection money, said one of the officers who was previously stationed in the East Precinct. Those running this Capitol Hill zone are employing stop and frisk. Ooh, I thought that was wicked. To anyone who walks through, and shaking down businesses for $500 for protection. Before the coronavirus outbreak and before the riots, the Seattle Police Department was operating at 60% of capacity. Officers were laterally transferring to other municipalities, taking early retirement and resigning. Candidates were seeking employment in other cities, and academy classes did not have enough recruits to offset the losses. In exit interviews, the main reason given was that they were demonized and not supported by elected officials. A recent raise as part of contract negotiations did nothing to stem the exodus. Someone tweets here, Cap Hill feels like tiny war-battered commune, food and medic tents everywhere, precinct boarded, protester barricades and patrols. Proud Boys were heard to be in the area. Sure they were. People fortified barricades. Several John Brown Gun Club people showed up to offer help. Some were armed. Understaffed, overworked, disparaged, now abandoned by elected officials. Officers are now talking about resigning in the midst of the crisis. The Post-Millennial reached out to the Seattle Police Department for official comment on reports that they are preparing to close more precincts, but said that they cannot comment on Seattle police tactics. Well, I guess if your tactic or your strategy is to retreat, and surrender the city to a mob, I guess that speaks for itself. Wouldn't you say, people? I wonder if these Antifa that have taken over part of Seattle and apparently want more have ever heard of the Paris Commune. The Paris Commune was a communist takeover of Paris following the disastrous Franco-Prussian War from 1870 to 1871. And much of the city was leveled, And many, many thousands of people, perhaps tens of thousands of people, were killed. Eventually, the revolt was savagely repressed. And communism was thwarted in Paris. Whether communism will be thwarted in Seattle is another question. Okay, so you have the lesbian mayor following the gay mayor, and you have the female black police chief following the female black police chief. Is there anything more that the people and the leaders of Seattle could do to pander to these idiots? Apparently not. And I don't know. I'm getting a strange feeling that the more you pander, the worse it gets. Again, Councilwoman Kshama Sawant, said it's about building the kind of political representation that brings the voice of the people into the halls of power and grabs power for ordinary people. The city council is going to be discussing budget issues, meaning two very important demands for us: defund Seattle Police Department and tax Amazon. It struck me that this is a very much underreported story. It's not on Drudge, and I'll be talking about that a little later. But I recall it was 1997, I believe, the protests against the World Trade Organization. The anarchists went nuts, smashing block after block after block of Seattle, and the police sat on their hands. However, at 5 o'clock, when people got out of their offices, the police were all over them. Suddenly it was a police state, because the police were dealing with people who hadn't done anything wrong and were no threat to the police. You know, if cities are going to hire more and more policemen who are exceedingly loath or simply refuse to get into any kind of physical confrontation with people, then obviously it makes it very easy for these people to take over the cities. But there was a media blackout with regard to the WTO protests. I mean, I had to watch this I was living in Vancouver at the time. I had to watch this on local Seattle TV because CNN wasn't showing it. It's not like downtown Seattle being sacked in real time is a story. No, but you see, it's peaceful, 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 peaceful. Maybe that's why they don't want to cover the story. So who is Kshama Sawant? I'm sure you'll be shocked to find out that she is not an American. She was born, she grew up in Bombay, and I'm going to call it Bombay. I'm not going to call it whatever stupid, phony alternative they've come up with. She was born in 1973, and she graduated with a Bachelor of Science from the University of Bombay. After moving to the United States, I'm reading from Wikipedia, she was shocked by the level of poverty and decided to abandon software engineering. She pursued studies in economics because of what she described as her own questions of economic inequality. She entered the economics program at North Carolina State University, where she earned a PhD. She moved to Seattle in 2006. So she was 33 years old before she moved to Seattle. She's not even American. But of course, this is the type of person who is now elected to office. Now, increasingly, people who are not Americans and people who have no connection, no organic connection to the places that they ostensibly represent. She first ran for office in 2012. And so she was finally elected to Seattle City Council in 2013. And her campaign was organized by the Socialist Alternative. Now, I want to talk about someone else who is a prominent Seattle politician, and her name is Pramila Jayapal. and she represents Washington's 7th congressional district, which includes most of Seattle, as well as suburban areas of King County. I suppose you'll be shocked to find out that this woman is not an American either. She was born in Madras. She immigrated to the United States at 1982 at the age of 16 and graduated from Georgetown and Northwestern. She worked as a financial analyst with Payne Weber. Woke capital. This woman hates America, and she doesn't bother to hide it. She is famous for hating America. She became a U.S. citizen in 2000. She is the author of Pilgrimage, One Woman's Return to a Changing India. She lives in Seattle with her husband. Janak, Jayapal's child from a previous marriage, is gender non-binary. In 2019, Jayapal, for the first time, publicly wrote that she had chosen to abort a pregnancy because pregnancy would risk her and the potential child's health. The pregnancy would not have risked her child's health more than murder, which is what happened. But increasingly, you see women say this, it was the best decision for the child. To be killed is the best decision? But apparently these women actually believe this. So why is Seattle becoming a colony of India? Well, the answer is simple. Bill Gates. It's Bill Gates. Was 20 years ago, something like that? Bill Gates, who was still running Microsoft at the time, hired every single computer science grad in the country of India. All of them. Microsoft's CEO for some years has been a Hindu. And I have seen many, many stories indicating that Microsoft has become a Hindu enclave. And in fact, hiring is done on a caste basis there now. Now, I suppose people might have thought in the past that, oh, look, we have these companies like Microsoft, which have started from nothing. Microsoft started, circa 1986 or in the 76 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it grew fast and fast and fast and fast. And of course, Bill Gates is from Seattle, from a prominent local family. And he relocated his business to Seattle. And they were hiring. So this would be good for Washington. It would be good for Seattle. It would be good for America, right? No, because Bill Gates decided that he didn't want to hire Americans. He wanted to hire foreigners because you can get them cheaper. And so this does not simply have economic effects. It has social and political effects as well. Oh, yes. But these immigrants, they're model minorities. Oh, then why do they vote for people like the two women that I've been talking about? Apparently, they hold these model minorities hold very extreme political views. And in the main, they seem to have a grievance against America. I'm looking at a map of this so-called Capitol Hill free zone. I'm reading from the conservative Treehouse. It's really quite stunning how the U.S. media have avoided reporting on a group of activists in Seattle who have taken over part of the city surrounding the abandoned East Precinct police station. No one is being allowed inside what they are calling the Chaz. The activists have barricaded the streets and will not let any journalists or city officials inside their declared zone of control. And there's a map here of apparently the police have holed up at a Safeway. I don't know, it looks like about half a mile away. According to the area activists, the East Precinct of the police station is called the Captured Regime. Journalist Julio Rosas tweeted photos from the zone, including flyers demanding that the Seattle Police Department be defunded and declaring that police will always be racist because capitalism requires inequality. Again, as I've mentioned many times, it doesn't matter whether you have a black police chief. It doesn't matter whether she's a female black police chief. And it doesn't matter whether you keep increasing the numbers of black and other non-white officers. According to the left, the police are institutionally racist, systemically racist, and there's nothing that can be done about it. You would think, as Sundance writes, that the militant occupation of a major American city by a group of Antifa activists would lead to a great deal of news coverage. However, it appears the media's zeal to cover, excuse, and justify the conduct of their radical Antifa allies has led to a complete blackout of coverage. Andy No tweets, when Antifa can't achieve a full revolution, they take over a small area and left to cities to carry out their utopian commune experiment. It ends in neighborhoods being destroyed and occupiers forcibly dispersed because of health hazards. They leave the filth behind to others. Yes, and I mentioned this before. In 2018, Ted Wheeler allowed a similar Antifa zone in Portland to go on for 5 weeks. Not only did it become a biohazard site with intravenous drug use, the local businesses and residents were terrorized. Taxpayers had to pay for the extensive clean up. So I just wonder what the game plan is here. Is this going to become permanent, or is the idea, as they occupy Wall Street, they're just going to be, they're going to get tired out and they'll leave? Oh, I see in other news, after imposing authoritarian lockdown orders, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer joins radical call to defund the police. Now, the list of demands, I'm looking at the Gateway Pundit here. It is extensive. You can go to Medium and you can find the whole thing. And let's see, some rainbow, some gay Antifa type says the list of demands, and they're both radical and realistic. Most of these, the city and state could just decide to do if they wanted. Here are some of the demands. And it says, we demand, we demand, we demand, we demand. These are not suggestions, they are demands. The Seattle Police Department and attached court system are beyond reform. We do not request reform. We demand abolition. We demand the Seattle Council and the mayor defund and abolish the Seattle Police Department and the attached criminal justice apparatus. This means 100% of funding, including existing pensions for Seattle Police. Maybe that will rouse the Seattle Police to action. Now there's a threat to their pensions. At an equal level of priority, we also demand that the city disallow the operations of ICE. In the transitionary period, we demand that the use of armed force be banned entirely. No guns, no batons, no riot shields, no chemical weapons, especially those exercising their First Amendment rights. We demand an end to the school-to-prison pipeline and the abolition of youth jails. Get kids out of prison, get cops out of schools. We also demand that the new youth prison being built in Seattle currently be repurposed. We demand that city government, not the city government, nor the state government, but the federal government launch a full-scale investigation into past and current cases of police brutality in Seattle and Washington. I suppose that'll have to wait until Trump is out of office. We demand reparations for victims of police brutality in a form to be determined, perhaps vegan food. They were clamoring for vegan food yesterday because apparently they have run out of food. We demand a retrial of all people of color currently serving a prison sentence for violent crime by a jury of their peers in their community. We demand decriminalization. Marijuana prisoners must be released. Yes, economic demands. The de-gentrification of Seattle, starting with rent control. We demand free college for the people of the state of Washington. We demand that the Seattle police be prohibited from performing homeless sweeps. We demand a decentralized election process to give the citizens of Seattle a greater ability to select candidates. We demand that the hospitals and care facilities of Seattle employ Black doctors and nurses specifically to help care for Black patients. We demand the people of Seattle seek out and proudly support Black-owned businesses. Your money is our power and sustainability. We demand the city create an entirely separate system staffed by mental health experts to respond to 911 calls pertaining to mental health crises. We demand that the history of Black and Native Americans be given a significantly greater focus in the Washington State education curriculum. We demand that thorough anti-bias training become a legal requirement for all jobs in the education system, as well as in the medical profession and in mass media. We demand the city of Seattle and the state of Washington remove any and all monuments dedicated to historical figures of the Confederacy whose treasonous attempts to build an America with slavery as a permanent fixture were an affront to the human race. And they give thanks to Kashama Sawant. Let's go to the chat and see what is happening there. Oh, by the way, could someone who comments on the chat called YT get in touch with me? There's someone who wants to get in touch with you, and I was asked to do this. You can send me an email at kevingrace@shaw.ca. That's kevingrace@shaw.ca. Okay, Manfred von Thistlebaum says, I'm highly skeptical of highly publicized events. Okay. Trump's tweet is insane and idiotic. Presumably that's referring to the 65-year-old who was pushed backwards and smacked his head on the concrete. He was clearly trying to swipe police communications. And again, if police are walking forcefully, in the direction of a riot, what are you doing jumping in front of a police officer and grabbing at his clothing? Okay. Let's see. MSF. Okay. Oh, I see someone speaking up for the current leadership of Microsoft. Taking to the streets is a great way to get destroyed. Maybe. For the time being, it certainly isn't. For the time being, the rioters are carrying all before them, and people remember. People, I suppose for quite some time, people remembered what happened in the 1960s when cops were given shoot-to-kill orders. And I guess that, that had an effect on people. Jim Smith says, I believe Indians are the largest ethnic group at Microsoft, or at least number 2. CEO Satya Nadella is Indian, but my understanding is that he received great reviews in his running of the business. I don't know. It seems to me that Microsoft products went downhill in a big way after Bill Gates stopped running the company, and Ballmer took over. And I don't know. I mean, what is Microsoft? They're toll collectors, essentially. That's what they are. Jim Smith again, Microsoft alternates with Amazon as the #1 company in the world based on market capitalization. Yeah. Is this a dating service, says Metal Mike? No, it's not a dating service. Okay. And the person who asked me for this thanks me. I'm glad to do it. Lamprey Milt says, what will come of the country after 2024 when the Republican Party is reduced to a yapping dog? Well, we don't know that is going to happen, actually. I mean, you can look at the situation in Brazil. That clearly you've seen a lot of, politically, a lot of racial polarization, and we are going to see more and more and more and more. I mean, the South of the United States is dominated by the Republican Party because white people are voting 70 to 80% for the Republican Party in that region. And it's quite possible that we may see a similar thing in the rest of the United States. Buddy says, tuning in from the sunny Midwest while watching my son's baseball game. God bless America. Well, I'm glad that baseball is being played again in America. I haven't been following what's going on in Major League Baseball. I'm assuming that we've already lost, April, May, coming up to half of June. I suppose there's going to be a truncated season. How are they going to maintain this 2 meter, 6 foot distancing playing baseball. I mean, you got people, running past the first baseman, running past the second baseman and the shortstop, rounding third, and then into the plate. Again, if we took this social distancing thing seriously, pretty much all human activity would come to a stop. But we've never taken it seriously. My trail of disgrace is, do white people get white healthcare workers or caregivers? Well, I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of old Americans and Canadians in nursing homes or long-term care facilities would very much want that because they are they're brutalized by people who have no sympathy for them. Lots of demands. What are they going to do from Seattle? Well, I mean, they're going to screw it up. I mean, it's already screwed up. I mean, I was talking about the kind of people who are elected there. Seattle is very, very much like where I live, Victoria. These are stupid white people who have a tenuous relationship with reality. Lecomte de Boreas says all sports are done. Well, it's not looking good for them. They had huge riots in England. Yeah. But he says people are completely 100% disregarding distancing here at the game. I'm glad to hear it. People talking up Microsoft's Surface notebook / laptop. I've seen it. It looks good. It's pretty expensive, though. Laramie Hirsch asks a question. When do you suppose citizens will ever be given permission to fight back? I don't know. Eventually, it's going to happen. It's going to happen organically. Otherwise, what we're looking at is a surrender, is an abject surrender, and truly the end of life as we know it. This is from The Hill. Christopher Columbus statues toppled in Richmond, beheaded in Boston. It's an act of solidarity with Indigenous people. The 8-foot-tall memorial to the explorer in Richmond was pulled down with ropes and dragged roughly 200 yards to nearby landing at Foundation Lake. It was also reportedly briefly lit on fire. The base of the statue was covered in graffiti, and the protesters held signs reading, "This land is Powhatan land, and Columbus represents genocide." What we're dealing with here, I don't think there's very many Indians there, Native Indians. This is just an attempt to destroy history, that these people believe that they created the civilization in which we live. They created nothing. They contribute nothing. It is their fondest desire to be rent seekers. They have absolutely no idea of the basis of civilization. Of course, the primary basis of civilization is order. They have no idea how wealth is created. They believe that government creates wealth. And of course, the Federal Reserve seems to have taken that view as well for the last 20 years. Protesters in Richmond noted that African Americans and Indigenous peoples both face white supremacy and institutional blah, blah, blah. Vanessa Boland, a member of the Richmond Indigenous Society, said the continent is built on the blood and bones of our ancestors, but is built off the backs and the sweat and the tears and the blood and the bones of Africans. Yeah, New England isn't. Sorry. It just isn't. And they're all tremendous friends of the Native Indians, the Native Americans, whereas, I don't know, up to about a week ago, they never gave a moment's thought to those people. We've been hearing a lot about controversial statues. Well, Seattle has a controversial statue that is not of a slave owner. It is of Vladimir Lenin, and it's 16 feet high and made of bronze. It was supposed to be displayed in Czechoslovakia, and then after the revolution there, the Velvet Revolution, it was decided this was not such a good idea. It was thrown in a scrapyard, and someone brought it to Seattle. And it's been on temporary display for the last 25 years on a prominent street corner, I'm reading from Wikipedia, in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle. It has become a Fremont landmark and frequently has been decorated or vandalized. The statue has sparked political controversy, including criticisms for communist chic and not taking the historic meaning of Lenin and communism seriously, or for taking it all too seriously. And they just love their statue there in Seattle. Their statue of Lenin, one of history's greatest monsters, and because that's the kind of people Seattleites are. A glowing Soviet-style red star or Christmas lights have been added to the statue during the holiday season since 2004. For the 2004 Solstice Parade, the statue was made to look like John Lennon. During Gay Pride Week, the statue is dressed in drag. I read that last night, and I was thinking, despite my many fond memories of Seattle, I'm now kind of not terribly upset if the place is burned to the ground. After the collapse of communism, Seattle decides that they're going to have some fun with Lenin, because I don't know, is it ironic? Is that the idea? Oh, and of course, Seattle is located in King County, and the official sign of King County has the glowering, stupid face of Martin Luther King on it. So you're thinking, well, okay, so there's some tremendous connection between Martin Luther King and King County. No, there is not. In 1986, King County Council approved a motion to rename the county to honor civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., preserving the name King County while changing its namesake. The motion stated, among other reasons for the change, that William Rufus Devane King was a slave owner who earned income and maintained his lifestyle by oppressing and exploiting other human beings, while Martin Luther King's contributions are well documented and celebrated by millions throughout this nation and the world, and embody the attributes for which the citizens of King County can be proud and claim as their own. Attributes such as what? Plagiarism, orgyism, aiding and abetting rape. Because only the state can charter counties, the change was not made official until 2005, when Governor Christine Gregoire, there don't seem to be many male politicians left in the state of Washington. Yeah. So I looked this up some years. Yes, Martin Luther King Jr. visited King County once for 3 days in November 1961. But what 3 days those were. Rootlessness. Seattle, King County has proudly embraced rootlessness. Oh, yeah, I've read this story in the Daily Mail, and I came to a conclusion. Oxford-educated American museum curator tweets how to destroy statues with household chemicals in wake of BLM protests, and says next target is memorial to racist Winston Churchill. Privately schooled Madeline Odent, curator of Royston Museum in Hertfordshire, sent a series of tweets last night to her 5,164 followers, which were then shared thousands of times. The American-born banker's wife wrote that the damage would be irreversible and practically impossible to stop, before saying her next target was marble memorials of racists with a picture of Winston Churchill's plinth. Apparently, these common household items cause irreversible bronze disease, which is explained in this story, but I'm not going to go into it. Yeah. Oh, let me tell y'all a little story. Y'all. This is intolerable. If you're not black and you're not from the South, stop saying y'all. Particularly if you're living in England, or you're living in Canada, or I don't know, you're living in King County. I know how lucky I am that my boss has my back. I know how lucky I am that my governing committee has my back. I got given a safe platform, and I will use it. Not everyone in this industry has this chance. If you're safe, join me and piss off some racists. And there's a picture with her with her banker husband, Pascal Ordant. They were married twice in both Britain and America. Her father, Dr. Stephen Briggs, an eminent personality psychologist, is president of an affluent private liberal arts college in Georgia, which boasts the largest college campus in the world. The Mail, for some reason, has decided it is not going to show the tweets in full. Oh, she is described as glamorous. That is not how I would describe her, but the Mail tends to describe all women as glamorous or awesome in their beauty and sexuality, etc., etc., etc. I read this story and I thought, we can't live with these people. Either they submit to us, or we submit to them, or there is a divorce. Because the presence of such people among us, and they think the same way about us, has now aroused feelings which have reached the level of mayhem and murder. This is definitely a pre-revolutionary situation. And as it stands now, our leaders are of no mind to hinder the revolution. Let's go back to the chat briefly. Okay. Chogokin666 says, I love how sanctimonious our upper classes are. I don't know. The sanctimony seems to have been wiped off their faces in the last 2 weeks, starting with Jacob Fry. And I'm very glad to see it. Manfred from Thistlebaum says, and I presume he's talking about George Floyd, I don't think he meant to kill him. And I will also say that there is no evidence it was racially motivated. This is just it being interpreted through the narrative. And that's absolutely true. Michael Walker says the police are killing black men for being black. Well, okay, sure, if you say so. Obviously, that's not true, but if it makes you feel better to think that. American police kill more white men than black men, not just in absolute numbers, but proportionally as well. GSP says, what happens after the next BLM outrage? How are whites supposed to atone? It's already been made clear to us that there is no way for us to atone, that there's no Jesus that's going to come to heal us from this original sin. And more white people are understanding this now. I mean, what we have a rush for spoils now, because black people in the United States have decided, or they've realized, that there is so much which is available simply for the asking or the demanding now, that despite the fact that with rare exceptions, white Americans are not interested in seeing movies which are dominated by black people. Same with TV shows. That's what we're going to get. You know, get woke, go broke. But they're going to do it. Edward Richardson says, although he is a semi-sacred figure to leftists and Stalin gets all the blame, it was Lenin who established the Soviet Gulag system, arguably the biggest mass enslavement in history until Mao. Yes, if you read about Lenin, you find that he was constantly getting reports from all over Russia, and he would scribble instructions in the margin, and invariably these instructions were kill them. My favorite example is of a group of blind minstrels who used to travel through Russia. They were mendicants. They sang for their supper, as it were, and Lenin was informed of these people, and the question was, how did they fit into communism? And Lenin's response was, kill them. Stalin, I suppose, was useful to these people. Oh no, Lenin, Trotsky, they were different. No, they weren't. They were bloodthirsty maniacs both of them. I wanted to talk about the Drudge Report. And I guess I started reading the Drudge Report on a regular basis going back to, 1997? The story that broke, that made him famous, was he was pretty much first to report the death of the Princess of Wales in Paris. And so I'd been going to Drudge every day, sometimes several times a day. I mean, it was my primary site for getting news about America. It is no longer because Drudge had been identified with the right. His value was of a curator. He doesn't get news stories anymore. He hasn't for many years. But, he put together a group of stories that were interesting and the kind of stories that were going to appeal to people on the right, and perhaps highlighting stories that were not all that well known. But now it is just, it's left-wing clickbait. That's all it is. Now, Drudge has always had a fondness for disaster right from the very beginning, but he has been stoking the COVID-19 panic for months now, and he is clearly on the side of the rioters and looters in America. NASCAR bans Confederate flag star to drive Black Lives Matter car. NBA, NFL baseball stars demand end to police immunity. National Guardsmen struggle with their role in controlling protests. Tulsa cop were shooting African Americans less than ought to be based on crimes committed. Miami rappers want Rubio retraction after calling them extremists. Little evidence of Antifa links in violence. This is interesting. Ghana invites African Americans to come home. And here he's pushing Spike Lee's new movie, Da Five Bloods, which is apparently timely and violent. As for his obsession with COVID-19, I would say that Drudge's personal circumstances make him the kind of man who would have a particular interest in disease. But for the most part, apart from people like, Democratic governors and mayors, people have largely stopped caring about COVID-19. But I guess panic brings the clicks. And I don't know. There's a site called, hang on just a sec, called Knewz, KNEWZ.com. I've been trying that out because I'm rather fed up with Drudge. And of course, there is the Daily Mail, which, as Alan Partridge pointed out, is arguably the greatest newspaper in the world. So, George Floyd's brother testified before Congress today because he is the brother of a career criminal who was killed after resisting arrest. There's so much that we can learn, apparently, from the life of George Perry Floyd. So much. This is from USA Today. George Floyd's brother on Wednesday asked Congress to make police more accountable. Well, a few blocks away, crews began disassembling some of the temporary security fencing installed around the White House last week amid protests demanding racial justice and police reform. On Capitol Hill, Philonise, spelled Philonise, Floyd, George Floyd's brother, along with family attorney Ben Crump, America's leading black ambulance chaser, and other witnesses discussed the death, policing practices, and law enforcement accountability and testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. Remember the House Judiciary Committee? Remember that absolute shambles of the impeachment of Donald Trump? Well, they just go from strength to strength. Floyd said, "I'm tired of pain, the pain you feel when you watch your big brother, who you looked up for your entire life, die, begging for his mom. I'm here to make you ask you to make it stop the pain, stop us from being tired. Again, this is so tiresome. It's all so tiresome. They're all so tired. Are they now? Are they now? If they are all so tired, why are they out in the streets? Protesting, looting, burning, occupying Seattle. Tired people do not do that. But see, tiredness is a sign of weakness. And these people have to remember to be weak. You know, they have to pour mouth for sympathy, even while they're demonstrating strength. And I don't know, was this broadcast live? Apparently all of the networks, including Fox, broadcast the George Floyd's funeral. And here's the Reverend Al Sharpton. And yeah, I guess the fact that this fellow, that he was not run out of society after Tawana Brawley, just indicated how rotten, how corrupt the American elite had become. And sure, this guy becomes rich and famous, and let's give him his own TV show, and let's get him on Saturday Night Live, because apparently they're not going to hold it against him that he fomented 2 honest to God pogroms in New York City. So KHOU, presumably in Houston, KHU, they have the whole testimony. The whole testimony. Was he referred to as a gentle giant? Oh. George always made sacrifices for his family. He made sacrifices for complete strangers. He gave the little that he had to help others. He was our gentle giant, just like Michael Brown. I was reminded of that when I watched the video of his murder. He was mild-mannered. Oh, that's why he spent 5 years in prison for a home invasion where he stuck a gun in the stomach of a pregnant woman and demanded drugs and money that weren't there. This is certainly a gentle giant who's mild-mannered and doesn't fight back. Yeah, okay. Enough of that. So I guess we're going to have a whole bunch of theories about what really happened, that day. We already know that there's a direct connection between George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, the man who was responsible for his death. This is from the New York Post. George Floyd and Derek Chauvin reportedly bumped heads while working security together at a nightclub years before their fatal encounter. A one-time co-worker at El Nuevo Rodeo on Lake Street in South Minneapolis revealed the duo's purportedly shaky history in an interview with CBS Evening News. The tension, Derek Pinney told the outlet, has a lot to do with Derek being extremely aggressive within the club with some of the patrons, which was an issue. The owner of the club, Maya Santamaria, had previously said that Floyd and Chauvin overlapped shifts on popular music nights within the last year. Someone else said that Chauvin knew him, that is to say Floyd, pretty well. Now, people are saying that this was a targeted hit. It was a targeted hit over some sort of criminal business that apparently they were both involved in. The difficulty I have with this is that obviously dozens of hundreds of people are arrested in Minneapolis every day. So how would Chauvin, how would he get to be the first responding officer to this? I mean, this suggests really serious corruption within the Minneapolis police, given that, it could be that, he knew Chauvin's, the license plate number of his car, and that, he informed dispatch or whoever was in charge that if this fellow was ever hauled in, that I want to be first on the scene. But of course, again, even the difficulty with that is that, maybe this was one of his it could have been one of his off days. He could have been miles away when Floyd was hauled in. I was talking about lack of accountability, that one of the reasons why cities across America and Canada, like Toronto, have been hiring black police chiefs is the idea that this will lead to an increase, a betterment of racial relations. And we have found that it does not. It simply hasn't. And I want to talk about Medaria Arredondo, who is the chief of the Minneapolis Police Department. To give you an idea what clown world Minneapolis is, that the previous chief was a woman called Janae Harteau, a white woman, despite her name. She was forced to resign after a white Australian woman was shot to death through the door of his cruiser by a Somali police officer called Mohammed Noor. And this Somali fellow, he was going to be a star of the police. The fact that he was an utter failure as a policeman and would have been kicked out of training, or, he wouldn't have gotten through his probationary period. No, they were just determined to keep this fellow and promote him and make him a star. But then he shot an Australian woman for no reason. Of course, there weren't white riots in Minneapolis or across America because of this. Oh, this previous police chief, Janae, she's a lesbian, as many police officers are, many police chiefs are. She was carrying on a relationship with a sergeant, with a policewoman within the department. How could that be possibly allowed? But apparently it went on for 20 years as she rose up the ranks. So what was it that Medaria Arredondo did to warrant becoming chief of the police of Minneapolis? Okay, let's see. I'm reading from Wikipedia. A fifth-generation Minnesota resident. Really? If you were a fifth-generation Minnesota resident, would you really be called Medaria Arredondo? He joined the MPD in 1989 as a patrol officer in the 4th Precinct and worked his way up through the police ranks until he was named the inspector for the 1st Precinct. In 2007, he and 4 other African-American officers sued the department, alleging discrimination in promotions, pay, and discipline. The lawsuit was settled by the city for $740,000, and in December 2012, Arredondo was promoted to the head of the Internal Affairs Unit responsible for investigation of allegations of officer misconduct. Okay, first thing here. So he'd been the head of Internal Affairs. So he had a pipeline to knowing about all the bad apples in the Minneapolis Police Department. Apparently, despite being chief, he did nothing about this. Also, we know now how he got to the cop. He strong-armed the Minneapolis police. That you will promote me and promote me and promote me, and if you don't, I'll just keep suing you and suing you and suing you. And we see this all over the Western world now. We see it in the Metropolitan Police in London, where the best way to be promoted to a very high position is to sue claiming discrimination. You see, it's a tautology. Well, I've been discriminated against. How have you been discriminated against? Well, because I haven't been promoted. Okay, but perhaps you don't deserve to be promoted. You see, that's discrimination right there. You're saying a black man doesn't have what it takes to get promoted. No, that's not what we're saying. How about we just give you a big chunk of change and promote you and then keep promoting you? Will that shut you up? Despite the fact that Arredondo is directly responsible for the failures of the Minneapolis Police Department, somehow he's being quoted as, looking to the future, let's look to the police chief, Arredondo, with his track record of failure. This is from CBS Minnesota. History is being written now. Chief Arredondo announces immediate withdrawal from contract negotiations with police union. This is part of a push to reform the department in the wake of George Floyd's death, the department that he'd been in charge of for 2 years. At a morning press conference, the chief said he plans to bring in outside experts to examine the contract with the Police Officers Federation and see whether it can be restructured to provide greater transparency and flexibility for true reform. He says his announcement will be the first of many he hopes will provide a pathway to provide actionable measures for reform. This is not about officers' wages, bonuses, or salaries, he said. No. This is about examining those significant matters that touch on things such as critical incident protocol, use of force, and also the discipline process to include both grievances and arbitration. Let's see, critical incident protocol, use of force. Who would have been in charge of setting that in Minneapolis for the last 2 years? I guess that would be Chief Arredondo, but he just comes out of this smelling like a rose for some reason, because black officials can't be held responsible for their failures. And as a general principle, increasingly in America and elsewhere in the West, no one is held responsible for their failures, and particularly those people who exercise power. Here's a loving article from KARE 11, NBC affiliate in Minneapolis. Minneapolis Police Chief Madaria Arredondo promises reform, pathway to hope. We will have a police department that our communities view as legitimate, trusting, and working with their best interest at heart. What our city needs now more than ever is a pathway and a plan that provides hope, reassurance, and actionable measures of reform, because I work for and serve the people. This work must be transformational, but I must do it right. Arredondo acknowledged the change will not happen overnight. It certainly hasn't happened over the 2 years that he's been in charge. I don't know. Are they looking to bust the union here? I get the impression that's what they're looking to do in New York City as well. This was a story highlighted on Drudge. It was the top highlighted story, not the fact that there was an actual insurrection going on in Seattle. New Jersey corrections officer mocks George Floyd death as protesters path. The mayor and police chief of the South Jersey town, they called it revolting. A man whose identity has not been verified was seen kneeling on another man laying down along Delsey Drive as a group marched past in Franklin Township on Monday. Another man with the group filmed the others. The New Jersey Department of Corrections said in a statement that one of the men involved was a corrections officer at Bayside State Prison. So was the idea that, he's going to be sacked? On what basis? I wonder. So apparently someone involved in this works for FedEx. And FedEx told NBC in Memphis that another person involved in the counter-protest is no longer employed by the logistics company. FedEx said, "We do not tolerate the kind of appalling and offensive behavior depicted in this video." I don't know. FedEx employees were witnessed burning down buildings, looting, attacking defenseless people in the street. Would they be subject to similar sanctions? Doubtless. Oh, America's at a tipping point, says Oprah Winfrey. Yeah, apparently she's very interested in this stuff. Perhaps one day she'll talk about her very close friendship with Harvey Weinstein. Yeah. Oprah, of course, has expressed some salty opinions about race in the United States. In 2013, she said that older people who were born, bred, and marinated in racism have to die before racism can be solved. Oprah got her start, as Bill Burr points out, by running the same sort of rubbish as Jerry Springer, and Morton Downey Jr. What's the joke he made about it? It's sisters who do whatever with each other, all that sort of thing. And it's like, oh my God, like, do you really do that? With the crowd whooping and hollering. This went on for many, many years before she became America's conscience. It's just, as long as people could be judged by the color of their skin, the problem is not solved. Well, people are judged by the color of their skin in America. It's called affirmative action. People are hired, and increasingly are being hired because they are black. It's that simple, and no one's denying this. We need more black representation. Well, I guess then you're judging people by the color of their skin. As long as there are people who still, and there's a whole generation, I said this for apartheid South Africa, and I said this for my own community in the South, there were still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated it in the prejudice and racism, and they just have to die. That's what Oprah has to say. Oh, so there are Black Lives Matters protests across the U.S. in the world. And again, I see. So I guess this is Philanese Floyd. He's wearing a black mask with a George Floyd sticker on it. That's rather going to impair the efficacy of the mask, is it not? Martin Luther King III, our nation is poised for change. Human rights activist Martin Luther King III said, okay, so Martin Luther King was murdered in 1968, which was 52 years ago. But this has become a company business. And incredibly, the media and corporate America have decided that the rules regarding public speeches are going to be thrown out. So if you run a transcript or a clip of one of King's speeches, you have to pay. Everyone knows, and the law fully understands, that public statements cannot be copyrighted, but it's different for the King family. And so now they're into 3 generations of rent seeking. But apparently there's a big split between, 2 different branches of the family, and they're at daggers drawn. This is from the U.S. Sun. Fury as photos show African-American hair products locked up on supermarket shelves, but those for white customers aren't. The images of hair care products at Walmart are said to show items targeted at African-American shoppers locked up behind a glass cabinet, while those more commonly advertised as being for white people's hair are left untouched. Okay, I can't really make much of this. Twitter user Jesus A. Rodriguez shared the pictures, which have gone viral, being retweeted more than 188,000 times and liked 600,000. He wrote, "It's more than just the police." The pictures have sparked fury, as many claim it is an example of bias against Black people in their day-to-day lives. I don't know. I frequently, when I go to the drugstore or the supermarket, looking to buy a razor or a device for dealing with hair on one's head, I find that it is locked in a cabinet. I never thought that this was particularly noteworthy before. I think it has to do with cost, primarily. One user said, "Damn, all the times I walk past this at Walmart and never even put 2 and 2 together. Holy hell, this makes me sad. I've never recognized all the little things." Yeah, I'd like to see an actual investigation of this. And later on in this story, there's a picture of George Floyd's golden casket in the back of the carriage. Kunstler described this to the funeral procession of Abraham Lincoln. But I guess that George Floyd is the new Abraham Lincoln, or, alternatively, the new Jesus, as Father Jim Martin, S.J., would have us believe. Let's go to the chat. Lecomte Boreas says Trump will win landslide. Alex DeLarge says not a landslide. I don't know. It used to be that people who reported on politics had some historical consciousness of politics. Well, they don't, or they're just dishonest. because the fact that Trump is well behind in the polls to Biden now means nothing. It means nothing. You see Reagan come back from a huge deficit. You saw Trump 4 years ago come back from an enormous deficit when pretty much every political pundit in America, a week before the election or even sooner, said that this was going to be a blowout, a 1964 blowout or a 1984 a blowout. They just, either they don't know anything about the history of American politics, or they're just determined to lie. They're determined to manufacture consent, as Herman and Chomsky put it. The idea is if the media says something often enough, then that will happen. And I see this as primarily the purpose of polling, is to manufacture consent. That people are asked a question and, oh, well, yeah, obviously the people think this, so it must be done. In polling questions where people haven't thought about an issue very much, it's completely useless, obviously. If you're talking about polls about support or lack of support for, say, capital punishment and abortion, both those issues have been argued to death. So that polling information is pretty reliable. But again, we don't actually have a race for president of the United States yet, because Biden has not been nominated yet. Traditional wisdom held that the presidential campaign actually started on a serious basis on Labor Day. And of course, we're quite some distance from Labor Day. But, they want Trump gone. Maybe they think that he'll pull an LBJ. After the New Hampshire primary in 1968, Lyndon Baines Johnson decided, despite the fact that he narrowly beat Senator McCarthy, he decided he was tired of it. He didn't want to go through this anymore. So he decided he was not going to run for re-elections. Ultra testosterone say Latin kings doing better than useless cops. Well, I guess they have skin in the game, right? And that is very important. Jules Roy says it'll be funny if Trump wins again due to a few thousand votes in the Midwest while losing a popular vote. Trump said after the election that if he'd wanted to win the popular vote, he could have won the popular vote. And I think that he might have been right about that. You see, one of the things that winners do is they decide what is the most probable route to victory. It's like, oh, Trump didn't win the popular vote. It's like, oh, yeah, there was a crummy win, like in a football game. Oh, because the other team, they scored more yards, they had more first downs, et cetera, et cetera. No. There are rules for winning, and winning goes through the Electoral College, and Trump's election strategy was based on winning in the Electoral College. Again, that is what winners do. Oprah should talk about her close relationship with Gayle King. Gayle King is a major media figure in the United States now, and it's solely based on the fact that she is Oprah's friend, if you will. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know. It's become so crazy in the United States now that I saw someone suggesting that, patients dead for COVID were going to be catapulted into the occupied zone in Seattle, referring to events that happened with regard to the Black Plague during the Middle Ages. The Turks actually catapulted corpses infected with the Black Plague against the Christians opposing them. And that's one of the reasons why, at that time, the Black Plague ravaged Europe. Okay, Alex Large says he should focus on his states, but he's not doing terribly well in Michigan or Wisconsin. In Michigan, the governor now, apparently she's all radical about Black Lives Matters and defunding the police after just making an absolute fool of herself trying to, take away the business license of a 79-year-old barber who wanted to give away free haircuts. GSP says the only reason I want Trump to win is because he would be a better accelerator than Biden. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Trump is genuinely a civic nationalist, but perhaps one of the results of the COVID-19 fiasco and now the riot fiasco is that civic nationalism, it's no longer sustainable in the United States. Neil Terry says the left has not consolidated power under Trump at all. They are simply pulling out all the stops to use power they've already had for decades. Manfred von Thistlebaum says, we thought the left was too crazy for people to support in the primaries, but we were wrong. Still, polls can be highly biased. A super predator says the rioting has hurt Trump since he did nothing to stop it. Well, if he did do something to stop it, he would be blamed for all these new martyrs. No, I think that this is, I don't know, this could be for the left as the Tet Offensive was to the North Vietnamese in 1968. The militarily, this was disastrous for the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, but they got through to Walter Cronkite, and Walter Cronkite said the war was unwinnable, and the media took up that cry. Perhaps they're hoping for something like this, but, you have the media saying peaceful, 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 and what people can see with their own eyes is that it is not peaceful. GSP says, think how many liberals would go completely insane and suicidal if Trump won. I don't know. I think that there could be mass suicides in the United States if Trump wins. Chad Chadson, thank you for your fine work as a moderator. Ultra Testosterone says, I think VP choice for Biden will alienate whites. I don't know. I mean, I keep hoping for Stacey Abrams. I keep short of Lizzo. Stacey Abrams would be the most amusing choice. I hear a lot of talk about Kamala Harris. Does anyone like that woman? Does anyone like her? I mean, I'll repurpose, an old joke that she's Hillary without the charm. Okay, so let's get back to it. Let's see. Armed Jewish group takes security into its own hands in Los Angeles. Magen Am, or Nation Shield, steps up to protect the Los Angeles Jewish community when the going gets tough. This is from UnitedWithIsrael.org. Throughout the past 2 weeks, protests and riots have taken over the streets of Los Angeles from Sunset Boulevard to Hollywood Boulevard. People were tearing apart businesses, including many owned by Jewish citizens. While the BLM Matter protests were mostly peaceful. That's like saying that a dispute, imagine that you have two men and they get into a quarrel. And so they're back at each other, I think you're wrong. No, I think you're wrong. That sort of thing. And this goes on for an hour. And then after an hour, one of the men pulls out a gun and shoots the other man dead. Would the media describe this as a mostly peaceful interaction? I suspect that they would. Let's see. How did Magen Am first start? First started when a then stranger reached out and asked if I could help write a program to begin teaching self-defense to rabbis. Over time, we bridged the gap from self-defense to security and just continued striving to improve. Mumbai, Pittsburgh, Poway, Muncie. I think it's obvious that this needs to happen for the Jewish community, and it must be an internal effort. He says it was really incredible to see our team step up over the course of the protesting and riots. Our programming has been designed around in-place security and at the shuls, while our licensing and much of our training is equally applicable to both scenarios. There was a lot of work from an organizational standpoint to enable us to begin responsibly carrying out a patrol response program. From working out the best methods to keep in accordance with regulations to logistically getting teams out and shifts covered, Thankfully, the riots were heaviest in the beginning and quickly quieted down. Well, I like this story, and I like to hear about these sort of efforts because self-protection, self-defense is the best. We are all ultimately responsible for our own defense. And what we've learned in the last couple of weeks is if you're expecting the police to protect you, you are in for a nasty surprise. Again, I'll repeat that repeated court verdicts have determined that the police are under no obligation to protect anyone. And even as mass slaughter is going around them, Columbine and other places, they talk secure da perimeter. That's what they say. The fact that everyone inside dies, not our problem. The fact that your neighborhood was burned down, not our problem. The fact that your store, everything that wasn't nailed down was hauled out, not our problem. Self-defense, self-protection is the best. Oh, San Jose police fire rubber bullets at own racial bias trainer during protest, maiming his testicle. Derek Sanderlin, a 27-year-old community organizer, suffered potentially permanent injuries by a rubber bullet at a May 29th protest demonstration. Sanderlin, who knows San Jose Police Chief Eddie Garcia personally, said he was disheartened to see how officers were treating protesters. Video captured by KABC's news helicopter overheard purportedly showed the moments an officer fired a riot gun at Sanderlin, who had approached with his hands up. I don't know. People understand that participating in riots or in protests which threaten the police, that this is dangerous, but I suppose it's not supposed to be dangerous. I've remarked previously that in recent protest demonstrations, I have seen a police line with a barricade, and I've seen people, particularly women, come right up to the police, like this far away, and scream obscenities at them over and over and over again, and somehow they don't think they're going to get clocked for this. I mean, it must take extraordinary discipline not to lash out in a situation like that. Oh, Politico has an interesting story. What was I saw this video? Was it in Minnesota? No, it was in Georgia, the National Guard. And it was a bunch of fat women doing the hokey cokey, or whatever the dance is called. And what's happened to the National Guard? I know they used to be called weekend warriors, but these fat women are not anyone's idea of warriors. Private Sikenya, this is SI''Kenya Lynch, a member of the DC National Guard, was on duty at Lafayette Square near the White House last Monday when U.S. Park Police cleared the area of protesters ahead of President Donald Trump's now infamous photo op. Lynch said she supports the protests and that her brother was among the demonstrators on the other side of the line, adding that he coughed a lot due to the tear gas fired in the crowd. I was happy to see him out there, to walk for me when I couldn't, she said, adding that if she hadn't been activated as a citizen soldier, she would have been among the protesters to support the people, and I wanted to support what was right. Politico spoke to 10 National Guardsmen who have taken part in the protest response across the country. Many Guardsmen said they felt uncomfortable with the way they were used to handle the unrest because demonstrators lumped them in with the police. I'm sorry, what has the National Guard in the United States done? Maybe something in Washington, D.C. Anywhere else? Again, they sat on their hands. They felt that while they swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, their presence at times intimidated Americans from expressing their opinions and even escalated the tensions. Here you see this fundamental phoniness that people who are looting, burning, and assaulting unarmed innocent people, which we've seen again and again and again, they're expressing their opinions. Some of the guardsmen involved in the Lafayette incident felt used. I'm here to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. What's going on here? Why do we keep hearing this phrase, support and defend the Constitution of the United States? Is this playing into the ongoing coup attempt? Is the purpose of this article to alert us that, if there is a coup against Donald Trump, that the National Guard will be on the side of the coup plotters? Maybe the National Guard can actually do something, actually provide some security when there are popular revolts against the military removal of Donald Trump from office. In a statement, Captain Chelsea, Chelsi Johnson, a spokesperson for the DC National Guard, responded to accounts of guardsmen who have been accidentally affected by tear gas. They were instructed to put their gas masks on when they were ordered to, or they noticed the police were putting theirs on. Every guardsman was issued a gas mask. Okay, so is the idea that National Guardsmen are complaining because they didn't put on their masks and they got teary eyes from tear gas? Is that? I felt that we were more protecting the people from the police, said DC Guardsman Specialist Isaiah Lynch, who's unrelated to Kenya Lynch. Okay. So, according to Politico, the National Guard is paused. Of course, they spoke to 10 people who were very upset. I didn't seem to speak to any others. This is the twilight of the sanitary dictatorship, but the media and Dr. Fauci and the people who want Trump out are determined to keep the panic going. From the Washington Post, coronavirus hospitalizations rise sharply in several states following Memorial Day. From the Daily Mail, Dr. Fauci admits coronavirus has become his worst nightmare, and it is not close to over yet, as infections near 2 million in the U.S. with more than 110,000 dead. The bleak admission from Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, comes as states across the U.S. continue with their gradual reopening efforts amid widespread protests over the police killing of George Floyd. Or in other words, that millions of people in the United States decided, screw that, we're not paying any attention to it. All of the orders that we've been given, we're going to ignore, and the politicians are fine with that. Why are we still listening to Dr. Fauci, by the way? He's had his time in the sun. Fauci continued that still so little is known about the virus, how it can be contracted or spread, and the specific impact it may have on the human body. I've been talking about this for some days now, that momentous decisions were based on the advice or the bullying of experts. And now the experts are saying, we don't really have any data on this. So why were you bullying the politicians and threatening them implicitly that they had to destroy the economy, destroy social life, and suspend civil liberties? Oh, White House goes quiet on coronavirus as outbreak spikes again across the U.S. This again is from Politico. And man, they are really looking forward to the spike. The coronavirus is still killing as many as 1,000 Americans per day, but the Trump administration isn't saying much about it. Oh, it's killing 1,000 Americans per day? How do they know that? And perhaps for some context, they're always talking about in the media about context. Now, Trump doesn't provide proper context. How many people die every day in the United States? Well, about 2.8 million die every year. So you can divide that by 365 and come up with a number. But strangely, they don't do that. And again, I guess, I've made my argument that it seems that few people can understand any numbers higher than 1,000. And so the magic 1,000 number here, which is supposed to make people quail in terror. Masks. We were told at the beginning there's no need for masks, especially outside. And then as the COVID panic dies down, you got to wear masks. You all got to wear masks everywhere, even outside. Even outside, what good are the masks outside? But we read that apparently there are right and wrong ways to wear masks, and a great many people are wearing their masks in the wrong way. This is from CBS in Pittsburgh. Absolutely suffocating hot temperatures complicate coronavirus face mask safety. When the sun does its impression of an easy bake oven, is that still a thing? The easy bake oven? I remember that from my childhood. The only thing you can do is look for some shade. That's exactly what Patricia Granberg was doing under a shelter at a Ross Township park at midday Tuesday. I'm dealing with it the best way I know how, plenty of fluids and stuff like that. But add the COVID-19 precaution of having to wear a mask, and Yvette says it's like suffocating. Absolutely suffocating. Ross Brooks, who was sporting a red bandana, said it's a little sweaty, but it's worth it not spreading the coronavirus. You're not spreading. I'm seeing a reporter here, Shelley or Shelby something from the station. She's out on the street where there's no traffic at night, and she's wearing a mask or a face diaper, as Alex Berenson says. This is rather like, Jews wearing a yarmulke or Christians wearing a cross. It's a symbol of religious devotion. I was talking about manufactured consent. Cautious Canadians increasingly wearing masks fear second wave of COVID. Actually, as you know, I live in Victoria, which is on Vancouver Island, and things are a little different here on to the west of the Coast Mountains. But I would guess that less than 5% of the people here are wearing masks. And as to this tremendous fear of the second wave, I'm not demonstrating it. I'm not seeing any demonstration of it because the social distancing thing, it's finished here. Occasionally I see some older people or some Karens still, going all the way around on a sidewalk or something or hesitating, but it's pretty much over. But Leger did a poll. 51% said they have worn masks to go grocery shopping, up 8 percentage points in 1 week. 45% they've worn masks, said they worn masks to go to a pharmacy, up 7 points. 17% at work. I don't believe these numbers. I simply don't believe them. 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Canadians were told that they must wear masks. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, who had not done so, started wearing one. And so Canadians are telling pollsters what they think the pollsters want to hear. Let's see. Toby Young and his lockdown skeptics. Lightning a bigger risk to pupils than COVID. Threat so tiny that virus parties may help herd immunity, say Oxbridge scientists. This is from the Daily Telegraph. Toby Young comments, remember, folks, if you want tomorrow's news today, read Lockdown Skeptics, because he pointed this out on May the 23rd. Now, okay, COVID-19 and George Floyd. Wow, it's just like this. You kind of wonder how, but that's the way that it's worked out. Nature, Britain's leading scientific journal, has enthusiastically endorsed a campaign calling for academia to be, quote, shut down, unquote. More specifically, the campaign wants STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and maths, to be shut down. Crikey, I thought when I first read it. I know I had a crack at Neil Ferguson's latest paper in Nature in yesterday's update, but I wasn't expecting the editor to react by calling for the closure of Imperial College, along with every other British university. The paper wasn't that bad. Couldn't Nature just retract it and move on? Turns out it was just a way for the editor to signal his support for the Black Lives Matter movement, which, among other things, wants to, quote, dismantle capitalism, unquote. For a second there, I thought Nature had abandoned its commitment to the pursuit of truth and joined the radical left. Let me ask the question, how does Imperial's new paper account for Sweden's low death toll. How did Imperial College's new analysis, the one unveiled in Nature on June 8th, account for the fact that Sweden's rise and fall infections and deaths has largely mirrored that of the other 10 countries studied in the paper, in spite of the fact that they all imposed full lockdowns and Sweden didn't? Well, again, I mentioned this some weeks ago, that this Israeli general, Ben Israel, I believe his name is, he said it's 40 days. 40 days. And then it's pretty much burned out. And this has been proved everywhere. But of course, this fellow who holds very high scientific administrative positions in Israel, well, he was a conspiracy theorist. And this is the future if these people are not defeated. These experts need to be ridden out on a rail because they are determined to ruin our lives, to ruin our economy, to make us live in dictatorships. They are determined to suppress all opinions that are not their own, even people whose expert status is arguably as high as theirs or even higher. The British government does U-turn. Schools won't reopen until September, if then. Obviously, after COVID-19, governments are very interested in savings. And if children can be kept out of school for, half a year, people are going to start asking the question, why are they going to school at all? Or why do they have to go to school for 10 months? Or if you count holidays, 9 months. Why not scale that back to 6 months? See how much money could be saved. Maybe they can all be educated indirectly through a computer. But it's particularly galling to me, hearing from teachers. We know that there's no risk to people under 15 from COVID. But apparently it's the teachers who are terrified. And these children are there simply to infect them. Clearly, they don't care for children very much. And of course, they have been paid. This is the big binary division, the COVID-19 panic. Who kept getting paychecks and who didn't? And since teachers only work 9 months of the year anyway, I mean, they must be feeling pretty good now that for several months they have been paid essentially not to work. There's a sign in Tunbridge Wells in England, coronavirus. Please do not use the benches during the current restrictions. Both they and the rocks are a potential source of infection. Yes, stay away from those rocks. Okay, William Briggs writes, the cult is growing in strength and number. Most of our leaders cannot stand against it, being either cowards, true converts, or in on the would-be color revolution. It is spreading to all areas of life across most of Western culture. Few countries are escaping or avoiding it. No subject is immune, not even the glory of popular imagination, science. And this is from Science Magazine, a tweet. The evidence of systemic racism in science permeates this nation. Someone, H. Holden Thorpe, emphasizes in a new Science Magazine editorial that it's not just abusive police that need to be reminded that Black Lives Matter, but the scientific establishment as well. H. Holden Thorpe, 3 names he has, science and scientists must say out loud that they have benefited from and failed to acknowledge white supremacy. Shut the hell up. I see, science. So, I don't know, was science dominated by Black people and then white people pushed them out? Oh yeah, let's talk about the Arabs from, a millennium ago. We could talk about that. But the Arabs tend to get a little touchy when they're accused of being Black. It turns out that not very many minorities want to go into STEM subjects. So why is that a problem? Different people like different things. Briggs comments, I'll say out loud that H. Holden Thorpe is an ass. He is either an opportunist or a cultist. I'm willing to believe either, but I'd bet the suck-up side. My guess is that he's crammed his nose up the nether region of politics in order to signal his virtue. But I allow he may be, like many of the useful idiots on our screens, a useful idiot himself. These days you just don't know. Before we get to Thorpe's calculated maneuver to keep or enhance his job, here's something similar from the American Geophysical Union, an organization devoted to politics. The article is GeoGrexit, Why Geosciences Programs Are Dropping the GRE. Before I tell you, can you guess why? Yes, white supremacy. Geosciences. Again, I'm thinking that this is not a field which is going to appeal to very many Black people. And again, why is that a problem? Geoscience graduate programs are increasingly abandoning the controversial test as an admissions requirement, a welcome development for equity and inclusion in this field. How can your school be next? A lot is changing this year in higher education. Amid the ongoing pandemic caused by the infectious coronavirus disease, COVID-19, universities and graduate schools have had to adapt to entirely online instruction and have canceled fieldwork, closed labs, and faced declining revenues. Briggs comments, this is included only to prove to you once again how political corona doom was and still is. Machinations will be blamed on it for at least 18 months past the last attributed death. Anyway, they want to drop the GRE, for which I offer no defense and do not care about, as a step toward equity and inclusivity in graduate admissions and education. Asinine ideas we do care about. Quote, the text is biased against women compared to men and against people of color compared to white and Asian people. This is from a study in 2014. Note the faux blessing the academic style reference gives the sentences. By bias, they mean men and whites and Asians outdo other groups, which is impossible under the cult's belief in equality. It is forbidden to think that consistent superior performance of white and Asian men on this quantitative test indicates genuine ability. Superior performance can thus only be due to nefarious causes. Whiteness, and we suppose Asianness, and testosterone raise emanate from test takers, which depresses somehow the abilities of the female and of colored. Okay. You know, I've heard people in recent years talk about nuclear power, and you know, it doesn't harm the planet the way that our ancient enemy, carbon, does, and so we should have more nuclear plants. And I'm thinking, I'm not so sure about that. And why? Because these nuclear plants are going to be filled with affirmative action hires, and given the damage that something going wrong at a nuclear plant can cause, and given that they will be stacked with affirmative action appointees, I'm thinking perhaps it's not safe enough. Okay, so the gatekeepers of science have decided to destroy the credibility of science, and maybe that's a good thing too. Because what is science now? It's pedantry. And it is studies which simply look to get newspaper headlines and cannot be replicated. What would happen if the number of scientists were reduced by 20, 40, 60, 80%? How would our lives be any different? That's a serious question, by the way. Obviously, science serves a purpose. But when scientists are saying that they are going to reject empirical evidence in favor of politics, well, perhaps, their time has come and gone. Yeah, Alex Berenson has become sort of mildly famous because of his stand against the coronavirus panic, which is now fully justified. He writes about how he keeps getting booked on TV and then they cancel on him. So I've kept quiet about this, but I have to speak out. Squawk CNBC has booked and canceled me 3 times in the last 2 weeks. First, they were going to have me alone. Then they said they would only have me in a debate because I'm such a conspiracy theorist. LOL. Fine. Not perfect, but fine. Joe Squawk and Andrew Sorkin, whom I have known for decades, are at each other's throats about lockdowns, and if a debate format is the admission price, so be it. I want everyone to hear the truth, and I will go on anywhere, no preconditions. So I agree. Then they tell me my debate counterpart is going to be Dr. Zeke Emanuel. Fine. We agree to Monday, June 1st. Date and time set. On the weekend, he cancels, which means I don't get to come on. Okay, the book comes out on last Thursday, #1 on Kindle. We set it again for tomorrow. Date, time, Zoom, call-in number. It is set, and Emanuel cancels once again. Busy man, I guess. Too busy to be on CNBC for 10 minutes. And apparently, if Emanuel won't come on, I don't get to come on either. Keep in mind that Andrew Sorkin is a professional television anchor, and as I keep saying, he can ask whatever questions he wants. The book is a hit. Elon Musk versus Jeff Bezos is a juicy, juicy business story. Why exactly is Dr. Emanuel's inability to appear relevant here? Of course, the media is going to do everything it can not to acknowledge the fact that Alex Berenson was right and they were wrong. And Berenson has come out with a short book of facts, actual facts about COVID-19, which is available for Kindle and presumably for other ebooks. And as he says, it has been a big success, which is gratifying in the way. It's called Unreported Truths, and it's already been translated into French. This is gratifying because it appears that there are still some people who are interested in examination of the truth and not breastbeating and shouting slogans and browbeating people. I knew this was going to happen, what I'm going to talk about next. And it's become kind of a joke amongst people who listen to the show or follow me on Twitter that I maintained for quite some time that physical media is better than streaming media for all sorts of reasons. I mean, the quality is much, much, much higher. But also, you see, if you buy a DVD or a Blu-ray, you own it. And you can take it off the shelf whenever you like and play it. And for as long as the disc lasts, which presumably is decades, it will be yours to enjoy whenever you see fit. And why is this important? Well, because streaming services are very much hit and miss. And now HBO Max removes Gone with the Wind. Because I don't know. Is it the very mention of slavery that reduces people to tears and murderous rage? But no, we hear talk about slavery all the time. Gone with the Wind, of course, is one of the famous, and it is the most popular movie in history. It came out in 1939, based on a best-selling novel by Margaret Mitchell. And it is a fictional depiction of a plantation in the South, and particularly of the daughter of the manse, Scarlett O'Hara, and of the terrible things that happened to her and Georgia and the Confederacy during the years of the Civil War and Reconstruction. Yes, there are slaves in the film, and some of them are good people, and some of them are not good people. And I think it's a tremendous movie, no question. But apparently the movie is patronizing. That's what I've been told for years. The character of Mammy, who is the, if you will, the head slave within the household, is played by Hattie McDaniel. She won an Academy Award for this. She was the first Black woman to win a Academy Award. Actually, the first Black of any sex to win the Academy Award. She is a fiercely uncompromising a woman of principles, a woman who brooks no nonsense, even from Scarlett O'Hara. In fact, she's not afraid of white people. Now, after the disaster that befalls the plantation, some of the slaves, they come back to work under the new regime. And we're supposed to find this ridiculous. Well, as it turns out, the O'Hara family was kind to their slaves. And it often happens in life that kindness is redeemed with kindness. But we're supposed to believe that, after 1865, every black person in the South, every former slave, regarded their former overseers with murderous hatred. That's obviously not true, but you see what you see in there's a famous scene in the movie. Scarlett O'Hara is about to be raped by a group of ne'er-do-wells, and she is rescued by one of her former black slaves. And again, we're supposed to believe that would not be possible. These people who criticize Gone with the Wind on this basis, I think that they're bad people. I think that they have no understanding of human nature, that they think the worst of other people in every situation because they are bad people themselves and they are projecting from their own beliefs. How many movies are going to be removed? Well, there's lots of movies with comical black people in them. Preston Sturges, Sullivan's Travels, is one example of that. Of course, all of the people in that movie, and of course it's overwhelmingly white characters, are mocked, often proudly, but no. And I've seen this in the AV Club. Oh, my dear. There's a comical black cook in Sullivan's Travels. Maybe they can, edit out those sequences like the Warner Brothers cartoons have been Baudelarized, Or maybe it's just safer to not play them anymore on streaming services. One of my correspondents on Twitter was suggesting that it might be time to, buy these films while you still can. Because I can imagine that, companies that specialize in bringing out old films, restoring old films, they're going to get a little queasy that why are you bringing to the public this notoriously racist film? And of course, they're talking about a film that only cinema aficionados even know about. But again, physical media is better. Doesn't it feel good to own things, to hold them in your hand, to put them on the shelf, and you could say, these are all mine, and they serve me whenever I choose. The entertainment industry is in an uproar. It is in a revolution, and it couldn't happen to a nicer group of people. So there are shows on television. The charge is made is that television doesn't reflect reality. Shows about professions, the police, doctors, lawyers, they're not realistic. No, they're not. And so Cops, which is a show which has been running for 33 seasons and is quite realistic in its depiction of what, criminality is like and the interactions between criminals and the police, that is being canceled. And we know why it's being canceled, because there's a lot of black people on Cops. Live PD, which is the most popular show on cable, obviously it's in serious trouble. Although Dan Abrams, the host, he says he vows, according to the Daily Mail, that it will return to the air soon. The CEO of CrossFit steps down after inflammatory George Floyd comments. This is from NBC News. Greg Glassman, he's the founder and CEO of CrossFit. He apologized. Don't apologize. Never apologize. On Saturday, I created a rift in the CrossFit community and unintentionally hurt many of its members, Glassman said. He had responded to a tweet Saturday by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, which is Bill Gates adjacent, that called racism and discrimination critical public health issues that demand an urgent response. Glassman responded, "It's Floyd 19. Your failed model quarantined us, and now you're going to model a solution to racism. George Floyd's brutal murder sparked riots nationally. Quarantine alone is accompanied in every age and under all political regimes by an undercurrent of suspicion, distrust, and riots. Thanks. That was an excellent response, and I applauded his honesty and his courage, but honesty and courage are surplus to requirements, and they are certainly not wanted. They're dreaded, in fact, in publicly traded companies. MTV cuts ties with teen mom Taylor Selfridge and pulls the plug on her spin-off show after reality star's past racist tweet saying black people scare me resurfaces. Yeah. You know, we discovered this in the Soviet Union where was it Yagoda? Yeah, Henrik Yagoda, the head of the NKVD. He said, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Conditions have almost gone that far in America. Because, look, this doesn't even have to be true. Someone can say, I heard this person say this or that. Or we were on a chat, an online chat, and this person said these terrible things. Well, I mean, just send it off to Sky Jackson, right? She'll publicize it. She'll get you kicked out of school. She'll get you fired. This is from Variety. Grammy Awards drop urban term. They will cease using the term urban in its awards and language as part of the latest round of annual changes to its rules and guidelines. I always thought that term, used by the Grammys was amusing because I'm thinking about an episode of the Larry Sanders Show from about 25 years ago, something like that, where Jon Stewart is the guest host and, he wants hipper guests and hipper music. So he books the Wu-Tang Clan. And this causes consternation with the network, with Melanie, the network supervisor. Did he just use that word? Did he just use that word? And so it was Melanie put it to Artie, the producer, that the Wu-Tang Clan was a little too urban. And he said, well, we could book my good friend Lenny Kravitz. He's only half urban. If you want to say black, just say black. Author Emily Griffin apologizes for her mean criticism of Megan Mertz. My comments were not legitimate. She's the something borrowed author, told the Associated Press. My comments were not legitimate. They were just mean. So that's sort of two different things. I do think it's okay that there's this whole idea of, is it ever okay to criticize one another? It's certainly never okay right now to criticize a black woman or a half black woman. No, it is not legitimate. Meanwhile, Megan Mertz and her hapless husband, Prince Harry, are shifting their focus from the impact of coronavirus on their charities to put their energies into Black Lives Matter movement, royal expert claims. Could these people be any more publicity whores than they are already? They're shifting their focus. What focus is that? The focus is apparently attempting to get rich. And Queen Elizabeth put the kibosh on that, saying they couldn't use the royal status to sell tat to people. They wanted to be the royal version of Gwyneth Paltrow with her goop. And what is it that they're supposed to be doing? If Harry and Meghan had stayed in Britain, they would have been doing all of this public service, because that's what being in the front line of the royal family is all about. But they decided they didn't want to do that. One of the reasons being that it doesn't pay anything. But Megan Mertz is trying desperately to rehabilitate herself. Speaking of Gwyneth Paltrow, celebrities hand over Instagram accounts to women of color for Share the Mic Now campaign. When the world listens to women, it listens to white women, read the official statement of Share the Mic Now campaign. Is Oprah, she a white woman? Is Gayle King a white woman? I could come up with other names, but I think the word amazing is used here. Certainly it was in a tweet that these are all amazing. It's amazing people filling in for other amazing people. This is the way that people in show business, particularly in Southern California, when I worked in Southern California, it was really disconcerting that everything was amazing, everything was awesome, every person was amazing and awesome, everyone was a rock star, etc., etc. And I thought, I have no idea what these people think of me, because everyone cannot be amazing, awesome, and a rock star. This is this Share the Mic Now. It's just parasites replacing parasites. And of course, if you thought that NASCAR was going to be a respite from this, no more Confederate flags, according to the one black driver, Bubba Wallace. And he is going to be driving a Black Lives Matter car, which I'm going to assure it's going to go over gangbusters with the overwhelmingly white Southern audience of NASCAR. In Canada, of course, the RCMP commissioner is a woman, of course. She says that she's struggling with the definition of systemic racism for the RCMP. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, the Ukrainian candidate, says police must acknowledge racism after senior RCMP officers' denial. A few months ago, this is probably all forgotten now, a group of native Indian protesters and their white allies decided to bring Canada's rail system to a halt, and rail is very, very important to Canada. And they were blocking. They're blocking the tracks, setting things on fire, all this sort of thing. And the RCMP was sitting on its hands. And so the question was asked of Justin Trudeau, why don't you order the RCMP to arrest these people? Because there was a serious possibility that places in Canada, like Ontario, were going to start running out of food soon. And Justin Trudeau said, it is not my business. It's not the business of the government to tell the RCMP what to do. Well, here's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland saying that the police must acknowledge racism. Oh, of course, everything that they say is a lie. And of course, in Canada, it's racism with a smile. Donovan Bailey reflects on racial equality. Donovan Bailey won an Olympic gold medal in the 100 meters at the 1996 Olympics. Fastest time in history up to that point. Donovan Bailey, great Canadian. You see? Shortly after he crossed the finish line, he was given a large Jamaican flag on a pole to wave, which he did. And then his first words to a reporter were, Jamaica forever. Paper citizens of convenience. But now he's talking about just how racist Canada is. I guess that's why he got to represent Canada. I guess that's why he became so wealthy. I'm told that he belongs to a Tony Country Club in Toronto. Of course, when these people, when they're training, they don't live in Canada. They don't. They all live in the United States. All track and field athletes, or pretty much all of them who aren't associated, with Russia or whatever, they all live and train in the United States of America. And finally, a public safety minister, Bill Blair, says police misconduct is indefensible. He was formerly a police chief of Toronto, and during the 2010 G20 summit, police costs for that were $2 billion for a get-together, a confab, which accomplishes nothing. We see a familiar pattern. I mentioned what happened at the WTO protests in 1997 in Seattle. Well, in Toronto, the anarchists had a great time smashing up dozens of businesses, and the police, his Toronto police, sat on their hands. But then, when the Toronto police was dealing with ordinary Torontonians who weren't criminals, Oh, no, you can't go there. Who are you? Show ID. Bill Blair turned Toronto into a police state, and now he's talking about civil rights and the like. Absolutely appalling. One last look at the chat here. Adam says MAGA isn't defined. When was America at its greatest? Are we talking about the 50s, the Old West, the Revolutionary period? Sadly, I think many people, including Trump, are thinking of the 80s. Well, if you'd listen when I was talking about Georges Sorel and Power of Myth, Sorel admits it doesn't need to be defined. Making America great again is going to mean different things to different people. I'm sure, boomers, the early boomers, they are going to think of the 1950s and the 1960s. Others are going to think of the 70s, the 80s, maybe even the 90s. People with a historical point of view are going to think of periods before they were born. But it's not necessary for it to be defined. A lot of chat really seems to need a wider perspective, says Neil Terry. Okay. Try to keep it civil. Neil Terry says normal people are tired of the BS. Quit spending so much time consuming enemy media. Well, I think that it's necessary to be informed about what the enemy is saying. But the whole point of the enemy media, that is to say the mainstream media, is to stop believing your eyes and ears, and that everything you thought you knew was wrong. And they're peaceful protests. Yeah, but what about the looting and the burning and the assaulting and the killing of people? They're peaceful protests. We don't want to tell you twice. You don't want to be known as the kind of person who doesn't understand that they're peaceful protests. What are you, racist or something? Let's see. Streaming completely reversed the consumer revolution of home video. Now movies are again fully under control of exhibitors and censors. Yeah, that's right. In storage right now, I have a few hundred DVDs and Blu-rays, and this is my library. I used to have a library of books, but as I've said before, you can't keep very many books if you keep moving. It's crippling. But DVDs and Blu-rays, they don't weigh very much, so it's easier to move them. They are all of uniform sizes, with very few exceptions. And of course, books come in all sizes. That's one of the reasons why it's difficult to pack and move books without damaging them. But no, I don't want, Steve Jobs decided that streaming was going to be the future, and he's been quite successful in this, obviously, and that's one of the reasons why there is no support for Blu-ray anywhere in Apple, because Steve Jobs was enraged by the fact that people could go into a store, buy a Blu-ray, and then they wouldn't have to deal with the iStore or whatever it's called now, that you could just cut Steve Jobs out of the loop forever. And that is a great virtue of owning things, that they are yours to do as you please. Okay. I collect papyri, says Chogokin 666. Okay, final comment. Deus ex suburbia. Media is full on gaslighting mode now, wanting you to deny your own senses. No, exactly. I mean, it's best just to read the summaries, So that's the show for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. I hope I can talk about Fassbender's The Marriage of Maria Brown. That might not happen. There's probably not going to be a show on Friday because I am moving that day to an apartment. After 2 months plus of living in hotels, I'm going to finally have a permanent place, but that involves obviously some dislocation. So the discussion of Philip K. Dick's The Man in High Castle is almost certainly going to be postponed for a week. That'll give you, some of you, time to read it. If you have not, it is a very exciting novel in all manner of ways. It's a novel about it's an alternative history novel about a man who wrote an alternative history novel. So all you young folks, I know you love meta. This book is metatastic. And if you'd like to support the show, and I would greatly appreciate that now, considering the circumstances I find myself in, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. I'll leave you with by now traditional benediction and farewell in these days of continued social isolation and the end of life as we know it. I do dearly hope that all of you manage to find some genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Thanks again. Good night.